Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Builder Nation. For today's saying that we have Eden Fulgo, founder and CEO at Mobot, the startup changing the way engineering teams test and develop their products. So welcome Eden, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Really excited to be connecting with you, and thanks for making the time to learn more about Mobot. I'm Eden. I'm the founder and CEO at Mobot. We are a company based in New York. We're a Series A stage startup. We're about 40 people. And basically what we are doing is we are trying to build mechanical robots to actually automate software testing on hardware devices. And so this is useful particularly in iOS and Android applications right now, because what's actually happening is a lot of engineering teams are having to build a set of test cases for their mobile app. And then a lot of test cases actually can't be handled with software automation. Things like Bluetooth, push notifications, location services, backgrounding an app, or even syncing to a hardware peripheral like a IoT device or a smartwatch. Those kinds of things are actually very hard to test. And so over the last few years, there's become an accumulation of a lot of test cases that require manual labor. And so in doing so, historically, there has actually been no solution to automate these kinds of tests. But with Mobot, we are building infrastructure as a service, which will allow any engineering team anywhere around the world to be able to connect to a robot, run a set of real tests on real iOS and Android phones, and then be able to get test reports in a web interface that details screenshot by screenshot replays of everything that was actually tested by the robot. And so we actually think that this will make it easier for engineering teams to be able to ship and use test cases like with real hardware without actually needing to have a robot in their office themselves. And so I guess to put it succinctly, what we are building is actually robots in the cloud, and this will enable iOS, Android, Apple Watch, smartwatch, IoT, medical device engineers to be able to improve their test coverage without having so much manual labor involved.
Wow, this is really interesting and totally new in the industry. I know that you were kind of inspired to start a company because your experiences as product manager. So can you talk a little bit about it? How was that transition like?
I started out my career building a lot of different web apps at a company called Palantir. They had this complex data backend, and essentially we would go to different customers, almost like consulting agreements, and we would actually build customized web front ends for all these customers. And so it was at that company that I got a lot of exposure to different types of web development, different ways to actually build and automate tests for web, and engineers would be able to build the app, then write their own tests, and then run in the cloud as a part of their CI/CD pipeline. And so what was really interesting was then when I transitioned into a product management role at a company that was building a medical device, I realized it was a completely different process. All of a sudden, you have a medical device where you have hardware, and you have to make sure you have the right version of hardware. You have to make sure you have the right version of firmware that's installed on the hardware. And then if that hardware and that product is interacting with a mobile app, you want to make sure you have the right mobile app installed on the device. And then also that when the mobile app is uploading data to the cloud, that the API is the right version. And so now you have like 6 different versions of different things that you have to juggle. So as a product manager, I ended up having to do a lot of herding cats. I had to check that the hardware team gave me the right thing. The software team gave me the right thing. The mobile app team gave me the right thing. The firmware team gave me the right thing. And then I'd have to put all of that together, and I literally had to test with physical devices, and there wasn't really an alternative. I couldn't simulate this with software. I had to use my real hands, real fingers, interacting with devices. And so the broader trend that I really kind of concluded from this experience is that as software becomes more and more complex, there are physical real-world manifestations of how you use products. And if we limit the way that we test to kind of these like perfect scenarios in software that don't exist in the real world, we're not going to be able to catch the kinds of bugs that humans are encountering. And so what we're doing at Mobot is making it easier to interact with a product the way that a human would actually use it. And so with more test coverage, we hope that this will make engineering teams more robust in the way that they're developing products. They'll be able to catch defects and bugs earlier so that those don't actually reach real customers in the public. And this will make it easier for them to get feedback faster so that they can fix those errors earlier.
So how much faster is Mobot than other forms of testing?
So it's ultimately not about speed, but it's actually about scale, because what happens is you have one person who can test on one phone at a time, right? And the power behind parallelization is that we actually think it'll be easier for you to have multiple devices, multiple robots testing simultaneously. And so you get speed by being able to do more work at the same time, as opposed to like, oh, let me granularly optimize for milliseconds between different test steps. And so realistically, using a robot for testing is going to be faster than if you were to do it yourself. But most of the leverage actually comes from, instead of having one person testing 5 phones one at a time over 5 days, we can have 5 robots running all the same tests on one day. So instead of taking 5 days to do your QA, you can now have Mobot do all of your QA in a single day.
It's totally about scale. And are robots always like supervised by humans?
Realistically, with the kinds of test cases that we've encountered from customers, when you choose to design a product, when you are trying to evaluate for usability, for functionality, there's actually a very particular way you want to test. So it's actually less useful for us to just kind of let a robot randomly tap around, almost like chaos monkey style, which is a type of testing that does exist. Is there any value to finding a bug that, only happens after you tap on the same spot 46 times? Probably not, because a real human wouldn't do that. And so as a part of test case design, it's actually quite important to be able to have a human kind of use common sense to determine what should we tell the robot to do. Don't just like let the robot randomly predict and guess what it should do. I do think we will get to a point where robots can probably make more informed decisions based on prior testing data in order to design test cases. But we actually think that as Mobot is partnering with all of these companies, we've seen the most value come from when the customer, the engineering team, actually knows exactly what they want to test. And so they get to actually inform the robot, this is the order in which you should test.
And talking about the engineers, you mentioned them earlier. And as CEO and founder, how close are you with these teams?
Working closely with our customers and getting feedback from our customers who are engineers, who are QA professionals, who are product managers is actually extremely important. It also really helps that I started my career in an engineering facing role where as a product manager, I really got to know and work very closely with engineers. And even internally at Mobot, I do try to spend as much time as possible with our engineering team, giving feedback. I'm very involved with product strategy and product decisions. And so I do think, especially because we're building a tool that's being used for engineers, it's extremely important that we understand the technical perspective of how these engineering teams are going to be using the tool. It means a lot of meeting with customers, interviewing them, gathering product feedback, watching them use the tools, watching them interact with our dashboards, answering their questions. We also provide a very tight feedback loop by encouraging customers to give real-time feedback on the testing results using tools like Slack. And so we actually can use that data and insights to be able to train the robot, update the test plan, update the screenshots, update the instructions for the next time we run the test. And so working very closely with engineering teams is important in kind of making sure that Mobot plays a good role and is a good partner in that software development lifecycle with all these teams. We're trying to integrate with them. We're trying to support them with the tools that they use.
How hard it was for you in order to find the product market fit?
Product market fit is an ongoing journey. I would say it's important even for larger companies, more established companies, even where we are now at this stage as a Series A stage startup. The market is going to continue to evolve. The iOS and Android ecosystem, more types of phones are coming out, new OS versions are coming out every year. And so it's important to be responsive and to be close to the market, close to customers. But definitely in the early days, I think I spent a lot of time working closely with and interviewing early customers and trying to get as much feedback as possible. And so I think the way to sometimes do that is being willing to kind of work closely with the customer, integrate with them, get on weekly calls, make sure that you get feedback so that you kind of also have to pick up on reading between the lines. The customer says, I want this feature. They might actually mean they want a different feature. They just don't know how to communicate that. Being able to evaluate kind of their feedback accordingly and use that to adapt your product roadmap is an important part in the early days as a seed and a pre-seed startup in finding product market fit.
And one of the last questions, I mean, talking about Mobot, what are the next steps? Talking about expanding, or are you planning to release any new project?
Our focus right now is growing from the 60 customers that we have today to hopefully over 100 customers. We'd like to be able to continue to validate that we are building the right solution for the right engineering teams. We'd like to be able to explore what other kinds of use cases are possible with Mobot's solution in the market. We'd also like to start to build out partnerships. So if there's anyone in the audience that is building a mobile app or is working in a field that has mobile apps involved with it, we'd love to continue that conversation and get to know. It's always we're looking to learn and really just understand the opportunity of how we can be leveraging robots as a service as an infrastructure platform to enable engineers to be able to focus on writing code rather than manually testing on all these different devices. So I think that's a lot of what we're focused on this year, is really just making sure that we hone a playbook for making a good customer experience, making sure that we also invest in shipping features around logging and reporting, making sure that testing is happening efficiently, and so improving the customer onboarding experience as well. And I think all of those things are built into the growth that we'd like to have this year and just increasing our customer count.
I'm pretty sure that you will hit the 100 really soon. What advice would you give to future founders and CEOs starting on this path?
I think more than ever before in 2023. So it's even gotten easier than when I started Mobot, 4 or 5 years ago. There are so many resources out there, so many opportunities. Even if you're non-technical, you can take a coding bootcamp, you can take a class. There's online courses, there's ChatGPT that will write code for you. And so I think in the early days when I was starting Mobot, I actually had gone to a programming bootcamp and I had learned to build web apps. And that was how I was able to build the first prototype for Mobot myself. And so I didn't need to go find a technical co-founder. I was able to also do sales myself. I interviewed customers. So I was in the early days as a solo founder. I was the first engineer. I was the product manager. I was the first salesperson. I was the first customer success person. And so you as a founder have to be open to and willing to learn whatever skills it takes. If you need to learn about marketing, you got to read a marketing book. If you need to learn about entrepreneurship, you have to be willing to do that as well. Like, not kind of having this mindset of like, oh, I need to find someone else who knows how to do it and work with me. I think in 2023, there's a lot that you can actually do by yourself. And the reason it's important to do that is because it develops your skills, which can then be used in your career later on, even if you're not starting a company. And it allows you to build conviction in the idea. Because the more you work on the idea, you're going to realize, do you actually want to work on this idea? Is this actually something you're passionate about? Does it actually have product market fit? And so the more that you can do yourself without relying on other people, I think in those early days, you need to be the one that's the most confident in your idea. If you can't convince yourself, you're not going to be able to convince investors, co-founders, employees to join your company, customers, because you need a pitch to them. And so I think it's super important to do whatever you can in those early days to build conviction.
Wow. That was one of the best pieces of advice that I've heard in this podcast. This was indeed amazing. Where can people find you? Where can people find Mobot?
You can check me out on LinkedIn. My name is Eden Fulgo. I'm the founder and CEO at Mobot. You can probably also look up Mobot on LinkedIn. And if you'd like to learn more about our robots or see a video of what we're doing in action, feel free to check out our website at mobot.io.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And remember, guys, that you can also find more information, interesting articles, interesting interviews, just like this one with Eden, directly on our website, controlhub.com/better-nation. We would love to hear from you. And once again, Eden, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences, your advices, everything regarding the company. And hopefully we'll get to see you soon.
Thanks.